Have dragons ever existed either on Earth or any other planet in the way they're generally depicted in our mythology, meaning enormous and flying and able to shoot fire from their mouths?
To some degree, that's also memories from your dinosaur era, since some of those remained longer than your official history reckons. And this indeed relates to some mentioned previously that did also dwell on your planet, right? So some of those could then perhaps be called dragons.
But
Not perhaps literally the same way we have for medieval stories, but very similar.
so were they able to fly and shoot fire from their mouths?
Somewhere, very likely, not necessarily enough to burn down an entire castle or something like it.
Okay, did any of these fire-breathing ones exist on Earth?
Yes, it's very likely itself that existed on Earth at least at some point, or at least visited, were brought there together with other travelers.
Okay, do you know roughly when they existed, like how recently?
Very likely they visited numerous times. In your medieval times, likely there were no longer any present, so some of those stories around the time. Oh well, there could have been some still present, but remnants. Individual survivors that were abandoned.
Okay. Uh, so on their home planet, so to speak, did they evolve naturally or were they genetically engineered to be like weapons of war?
They were engineered by themselves, so to speak. They came from what you consider a higher dimensionality than non-physical. They reduced themselves to be more physical. Some of them were very intelligent.
Okay. Um, like intelligent in terms of like human intelligence or more like the intelligence on the level of class?
Yes, perhaps more than us.
Okay. Um, so
Again, there were more than non-physical for a longer, you consider, time period or a frequency range that is, well, non-physical. Therefore, perhaps also to some degree related to what you would consider our origin, etc. But those that were eventually more physical and reduced, some of them also were more primitive in terms of more what you consider perhaps an animal species on that level, right? Or so related to dinosaurs. You have a very general concept of dragons, but remember from your different mythologies there are numerous kinds, right? And that's just a small fraction. There are many individual beings that from your own mythological interpretation would be considered dragons, right? The
right.
same way your Bigfoot idea or Sasquatch, etc., correct? Many of this gets lumped in your own understanding or misunderstanding of what exists outside of your own world.
Right. So the more physical ones that flew around and were enormous and breathed fire, like who brought them to Earth and why?
Well, some of our kind, not necessarily us, but others brought them, indeed, as you mentioned, weapons of war, but not necessarily like a war elephant, for example, like the Hannibal person used, right? But more in the idea also as advisors, overseers. Well, you don't really have a concept like such in your own world. Many of them were also not necessarily aligned with one side or the other.
Okay.
Many of them are quite wise creatures. You are having them lumped into a large degree also with us, also with our kind. Since we're both of a reptilian nature,
Do you know when they
some
were
of them are also able to project, right, on our planet, bilocate or, well, yes, from what we're getting, well, interacting with them while we're interacting with you. And to a large degree, they're bilocated.
what does that mean, bilocated?
They were still somewhere else, right? Like teleportation, except it still they exist still on the same point from which one would teleport, as well as the point to where they teleport. So
Okay.
like a duplication, but another location, basically.
Okay. Do you know when they first came to Earth?
Before you,
Were the dinosaurs still ruling the Earth?
yes.
So why don't they still exist on Earth now?
well, they left after the cataclysm to a large degree. Only remnants remained or came back chiming in here and there. There were also many wars. Remember, there wasn't just a war that wiped out our kind to some degree, right? There were also other conflicts in your own species. Some of them interfered, some other species interfered. That's where the old stories of gods, of animal gods, etc. come from. And eventually, once more of the humanoids of your own hair's monkey nature were more ruling over your own planet. That's also when they took less and less of an interest in interacting, even though they're not as much speciesist, perhaps, as we are, for example. They were still willing to oversee other mammalian creatures, but during your medieval times was like the last point when any had still somewhat of an interest in interaction, as your species also reduced more and more with the ability to interact with, well, the non-physical, etc., due to your own riches undertakings that were more putting a limitation on different species, pigeonholing the entire reptilian kind, for example. You remember your story, right, of the Garden of Eden with the serpent, etc. Coming from older stories, the more those became ingrained in your different cultures in one way or the other, there was less of an ability to have somewhat of an understanding.
Okay, do you know why we don't have fossilized skeletons of them like we do from different dinosaur species?
Yes, because most of them simply left. Again, the bilocation idea, they simply withdrew such instead of simply, well, dying off. And there might indeed have been some that did die on your planet one way or the other, and your fossils have simply been, well, scattered or they've been put together in various different forms, and perhaps some, well, suggest that's the case, but it's possible at least, some have been intentionally misconstructed to obstruct your history, as you were. Your official history is often not very much truthful for various reasons, and to some degree it's also, well, if you wish, you consider a conspiracy theory, as there are so many on your planet, right? Which very often is simply the fact that there's, well, numerous versions to one story. In this case, it's at least possible that something has been hidden or destroyed if it was found, because different cultures on your world at some point or another had an interest in preserving their own version of history. If something didn't fit, it was destroyed or hidden, etc. So it's indeed possible there need to be some fossil somewhere that simply get intentionally hidden or even smashed over. But then again, the reason you're finding larger amount of such is very likely due to the fact that they simply withdrew their relocation or they just physically left.
Okay. So can you describe the general science behind how they're able to breathe out fire? I mean, like, does their body create some flammable liquid?
Their higher intelligence, just related to the earlier ideas, therefore they had the possibility to switch back and forth, unlike dinosaurs. And now for the fire idea, yes indeed, there was a biological function. It was also, again, not to the degree that they could, like a flamethrower, right? Much less than such. Perhaps more gas-like, right?
So was it kind of like...
Moment, water.
Okay.
Yes.
So, like, is it kind of like they would shoot out a thin stream of fire, or would they just kind of like shoot out kind of like a burst of fire, like a cannonball or something?
Perhaps more of the latter, a burst or a cloud, right?
Okay.
Like very hot press.
Very hot what?
Press, freezing. Freezing out, fire, yes.
Okay. But were there literal flames?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, bursts of flames, but more like a cloud.
Okay. Do you know if anyone on Earth, either human or whatever, has ever been able to ride on the back of a dragon and use it in battle, like in a lot of our fantasy books and movies?
We're aware it's possible. Not certain that anybody's done that. But
Okay.
physically, I mean, they're just as physical at some point that it was impossible to physically climb upon them, and if the dragon would be willing, it could have indeed transported the person, nearly in battle.
Okay.
But transportation, yes.
So the book The Hobbit, there's a dragon named Smog who's able to speak kind of like, like literally speak like humans do, and he loves gold more than anything. I mean, this is kind of a stupid question, but like, do any dragons either talk or love gold like the dragon Smog?
From we're aware of, they're all telepathic. So there's no necessity to use vocal cords. Much of your fantasy stories are also based on mythology, and mythology, again, is to a large degree humanized, but very often based on ancient events that have been, well, hearsay, so to speak, right?
Uh-huh.
Not gold, well, that's something perhaps more of some of the hairless monkeys that the Earth were interested in.
Okay.